As a new Christian in a Presbyterian church, I saw a lot of heated discussions about Calvinism. Now, I always knew that Calvinism was named after a guy, but who was this guy? My name is Gail Neal, and this is Jesus Stories, where we find out about Christian history and about heroes of the faith. Calvin was raised in the Roman Catholic Church because that's the only church there was at that time in Western Europe. He was 8 years old when Luther posted his 95 Theses. By 1527, 18-year-old Calvin was studying law in Paris, and that's where he met and became friends with reform-minded activists in Paris. And it was because of these contacts that he had to flee from Paris just 6 months later. For the next 3 years, young Calvin lived more or less on the run. He moved around a lot and changed his name just as often. By 1536, Calvin had disengaged himself from the Roman Catholic Church, and he first published his most famous work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion. Like Luther's 95 Theses, the Institutes benefited from the recent invention of the printing press. The Institutes was an instant bestseller. Well, that is best-selling amongst things that cost a month's wages. Calvin continued to move around Europe and wound up in Geneva. A local reformist invited him to stay in Geneva and threatened him with God's anger if he didn't. He was asked to leave 2 years later, but then he was invited back in 1541. With Calvin back in Geneva, the town council enacted Calvin's ecclesiastical ordinances, which instituted Calvin's conception of church order, provided for the religious instructions of all people, but especially children, and established an ecclesiastical court, which composed of elders and ministers, and that assembly would oversee all aspects of Genevan life. This court was devoted to putting down the Roman Catholic superstition, enforcing sexual morality, the regulation of taverns, and measures against dancing, gambling, and swearing. No art was allowed other than music, and even that could not involve instruments. Punishments were severe. 58 people were executed during the first 5 years of Calvin's rule. Another 78 were exiled. The town council did eventually take back control of sentencing, and Calvin's courts limited punishment to just excommunication. Calvin was a serious workaholic. In 1558, shortly after recovering from a fever, he strained his voice while preaching, which brought on such a violent coughing fit that he burst a blood vessel in his lungs. He lived for several years after that, but he never fully recovered. John Calvin passed away in 1564 at the age of 54. As Calvin's body lay in state, so many people came to see him that the reformers were afraid of creating a new saints cult. To prevent potential idolatry, Calvin was buried in an unmarked grave. While there are some good guesses, the actual exact location is still unknown. Martin Luther started the Protestant Reformation, but Calvin picked up the baton and became the most important figure in the second generation of the Protestant Reformation. So what makes Calvin relevant 500 years later? We'll talk about that next time. Thanks for watching Jesus Stories, where we find out about church history and about heroes of the faith. Because so much of who we are is because of who they were. I hope you'll hit the like button. That is a huge help to the channel. But also share this information with people who need to hear about the history of our faith. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.